Hello there, and welcome to Deep Earth Stories. You can subscribe to Deep Earth Stories and join me again for the next slow journey. And if you feel like it, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from tonight, because I always love seeing how many different corners of the world meet here in the dark. Tonight we're going to take a slow, quiet journey together. There is no rush. There's nowhere else you need to be right now. Whatever happened today, the noise, the movement, the thinking, you can set all of that down, just for now, just for this hour. Maybe you're lying in bed. Maybe the room is dim and the world outside has gone quiet. Maybe you have your headphones on and this voice is the only sound around you. That is good. That is exactly where you're supposed to be. Get comfortable. Pull the blanket a little closer. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw go soft. Tonight, we're going to ask a very old question. A question that some people have whispered about for centuries. A question that scientists and historians and quiet dreamers have turned over in their minds, like a smooth stone in their hands. What if we are not the first? What if, long before our cities, before our roads, before our written words and our electric lights, what if there was something else? A people, a civilization, a world that rose slowly, lived for a long time, and then, somehow, ended. And what if we are what came after? What if we are the reset? I want you to hold that thought gently, not with fear, not with sharp urgency. Just hold it the way you might hold a warm cup of tea in the dark. Let it sit with you. Let it breathe. Because here is the thing about deep time. Here is the soft and quiet truth that we sometimes forget in our busy, bright lives. The Earth is very, very old, and we have only been here for the smallest, thinnest sliver of that time. So tonight, we are going to drift together through that deep time. We are going to walk softly through what we know and what we wonder, and what the stones and the ice and the quiet ocean floor might still be trying to tell us. You do not need to stay fully awake for this. If your eyes feel heavy, that is okay. If you drift in and out, that is more than okay. The story will still be here. The journey will still be gentle. Just breathe. And let's begin. Chapter 1. A Planet That Forgets. Imagine the Earth as a very old book. Not a book made of paper, but a book made of stone and ice and soil and ocean. A book that has been written and rewritten over billions of years. A book that has been flooded, burned, frozen, cracked, and slowly rebuilt so many times that most of its early pages are simply gone. That is the Earth we live on. When we talk about history, when we talk about ancient Rome, or ancient Egypt, or the first humans walking across the savannah, we're talking about the most recent few pages of that enormous book. We're talking about the last 10,000 years, maybe the last 100,000 years if we stretch. But the book itself is 4.5 billion years old. Think about that number for a moment. Let it settle slowly. 4.5 billion years. If you pressed your palm flat against the surface of that book and you looked at the very edge of the last page, the thin line at the very end, that thin line would be all of human history. Everything we have ever built, every empire, every discovery, every song ever sung, it would all fit inside that tiny line. And all the rest of the book, all those billions of years of pages, most of that is silent. Most of that has been erased by time itself. Now here is the question that drifts up from that silence. If so much has been erased, how do we really know what came before us? We find bones, we find pottery, we find the outlines of old walls buried under soil, we find bits of charcoal and seeds and flakes of stone, and from all of these small quiet clues we build our picture of the past. But here is the soft and humbling truth. The things that survive for thousands of years are very specific kinds of things. Stone survives, Ceramics survive sometimes. Gold survives, but wood rots, cloth dissolves, mud brick crumbles back into dust. Organic materials, all the soft living things that civilizations are mostly made of, they disappear. So when we look back 50,000 years, or 100,000 years, or further, we're only seeing what happened to survive, not everything that actually existed. And that, very quietly, is the door through which our question enters. What if something existed that did not survive? What if there was a civilization not built of stone temples and bronze weapons, but built of softer things, more temporary things, that rose and fell so long ago that nearly every trace of it has dissolved back into the earth? We would not necessarily know. That is not a scary thought. It is just a humble one. The earth is a very good eraser. Let's drift a little further into this. Think about what we mean when we say civilization. It is a big word, but let's make it simple. A civilization is a group of people who live together, who share ideas, who build things, who pass knowledge from one generation to the next. A civilization is a community that grows complex enough to leave a mark. But marks come in different forms. We tend to imagine civilization as big stone monuments. The pyramids of Egypt, the stone circles of England, the carved temples of Southeast Asia. We think of civilization as something large and visible and permanent. But our own civilization, the modern one, is not mostly made of stone. It is made of concrete, which crumbles within centuries. It is made of plastic, which breaks down over hundreds of years, not millions. It is made of digital information, which lives on servers that will be gone in a human generation or two unless constantly maintained. If our civilization ended tonight, if everything stopped, how much of it would still be visible in 1,000,000 years? Honest answer, almost nothing recognizable. A few layers of strange chemistry in the rock, a slight increase in certain metals in the soil. Maybe some microplastic threads woven into stone that was once ocean floor. That is it. That is what 1,000,000 years of erosion and pressure and water and heat would leave of everything we have built. So we must be humble. We must sit quietly with the possibility that the same thing could have happened before us. Not once, perhaps many times. The earth turns slowly and it forgets very well. For a moment, just breathe. Notice the weight of your body where it rests. Notice how the air moves softly in and out. There is nothing you need to do right now. The questions we're asking tonight are gentle ones. They are not here to frighten you. They are here to open something soft and wide inside you. A sense of wonder, a sense of how big and quiet time really is. If your eyes are already heavy, that is perfectly fine. Let them close. The story will keep going. Chapter 2: The Age of Ice and Silence. Let's go back, way back, further than Egypt, further than the first stone tools we usually talk about. Let's go back to a time the scientists call the Pleistocene. The Pleistocene was an age of ice. It lasted from about 2.5 million years ago until roughly 11,000 years ago. During that long, slow era, massive sheets of ice moved across the northern parts of the world. Sheets so thick, so heavy, so enormous that they pressed the land down under their weight. Glaciers the size of continents, grinding slowly across everything in their path. And then, starting around 15,000 years ago, the ice began to melt. It melted slowly at first, then faster and faster. Over thousands of years, sea levels rose, coastlines changed, great rivers flooded, low-lying plains, where early humans often lived close to water and food, were swallowed by the rising sea. Imagine standing on a shore and watching the water come, not a tsunami, not a sudden wall of blue, but a slow, inexorable rise, year after year, generation after generation. The water coming just a little closer, Then a little closer again. Villages moving. People carrying their things inland. Children growing up in places their grandparents had never lived. This is what happened at the end of the last ice age. And this is important for our story. Because when the ice melted, the sea level rose by approximately 120 meters, that is nearly 400 feet, compared to where it had been at the height of the ice age. Think about what that means. All the coastlines that existed 15,000 years ago are now underwater. All the low valleys, all the river mouths, all the flat fertile plains near ancient shorelines, drowned under the sea. If there were people living along those ancient coasts, and we know there were because humans have always loved to live near water, their homes, their settlements, their earliest built places are all beneath the ocean now. Archaeology on land is already difficult. Archaeology underwater, in deep ocean, on ancient coastlines that are now buried under sediment from thousands of years of water pressure, that is nearly impossible with our current tools. We have barely looked, and this is where the story gets quietly, gently interesting. Around the world, in many different cultures that have had almost no contact with each other, there are old stories about a great flood. Not the same flood, necessarily, not a single event copied from one people to another, but something that echoes, again and again, across mythologies and oral traditions from every continent. The Sumerians of ancient Mesopotamia told of a flood that covered the world. The Hindu texts speak of Manu, who was warned of a coming flood and built a great boat to survive it. The indigenous peoples of North America have flood traditions, so do the people of ancient China, so do communities in the Pacific Islands, in sub-Saharan Africa, in South America. A flood is one of the most universal stories that exists across all of human memory. Now the skeptical, careful part of our thinking says, floods happen everywhere. Of course, many cultures would have flood stories. Rivers flood, coasts flood, storms bring water. It is not surprising. And that is fair. That is honest. But there is another layer here, because the end of the last ice age, that slow, steady, multi-thousand-year rise of the seas, was something that real human beings lived through. It was something that real communities experienced. They watched the water come. They moved their families. They told their children. Their children told their grandchildren. And those stories got carried forward through generations, through millennia, becoming simpler and more mythic with each retelling until they arrived in the texts and traditions we can still read today. Some researchers have gently suggested that our flood myths are not just metaphor. They are memory. Very, very old memory. The kind of memory that a species carries when it has survived something overwhelming and has not quite been able to forget it. Let's slow down here. Let's breathe for a moment in this quiet. It is okay if you're yawning. It is okay if the room feels softer and warmer than it did when we started. These ideas are not urgent. They are not going anywhere. They have been waiting in the earth for thousands of years. You can drift. You can let the words wash over you like slow water. Chapter 3. The oldest stones. There is a place in Turkey, a place called Göbekli Tepe, that changed the way archaeologists think about the beginning of civilization. Say that name softly. Göbekli Tepe. It means, roughly, Potbelly Hill in Turkish, and it sits on a hilltop in southeastern Turkey, in a dry and quiet landscape of rolling stone and pale grass. Before it was excavated in the 1990s, it looked like any other hill, slightly rounded, slightly raised, not particularly remarkable. But beneath the surface, carved into the stone and buried under thousands of years of soil, was something extraordinary. Massive stone pillars, carved with animals, foxes, boars, birds, snakes winding in careful, deliberate patterns, circles of standing stones, some of them nearly 6 meters tall, that is about 20 feet, and weighing up to 20 tons each, and the date? Roughly 11,000 to 12,000 years ago. Let that settle. 12,000 years ago, before the pyramids by 7,000 years, before the invention of writing, before the plough, before the wheel, someone built this. Not a few rough stones piled together, but a complex, organised, carefully planned ritual site with sophisticated carved imagery, geometric precision, and, this is important, clear evidence that it required a large, organised group of people to construct. To carve and move stones that heavy, you need dozens, perhaps hundreds of coordinated workers. You need someone who can plan, who can communicate a vision, who can organise food and tools and labour across time. That is not the behaviour of a small wandering band of hunter-gatherers. That is something more complex. And yet, at the time we thought humans were supposed to be simple nomads, not builders, not organisers, not people capable of abstract religious or ceremonial thought on this scale. Göbekli Tepe rewrote the story. It pushed back the beginning of organised human behaviour by thousands of years, and it whispered something to the researchers who stood among its stones for the first time. Maybe we have been underestimating our ancestors. Maybe the beginning of civilization is much older than we thought. But here is the gentle mystery that Göbekli Tepe also carries. Whoever built it deliberately buried it. At some point, perhaps around 10,000 years ago, the site was intentionally filled in. The great stone circles were covered with soil and rubble. The carvings were buried. The whole thing was sealed under the earth. Nobody knows exactly why. Was it a ritual act? A way of closing a sacred place that had served its purpose? Was it done to protect the site from an approaching danger? Was it simply that the community moved on, and this was their way of saying goodbye? We do not know. We may never know. But there is something quietly beautiful about the fact that the very act of burying the site is what preserved it. If Göbekli Tepe had been left open to wind and rain and time, it might have eroded away entirely. Instead, the people who buried it, whether they knew it or not, gave it to us 12,000 years later. The earth kept their secret, and when we finally looked, we found it waiting. There is something here worth sitting with. Göbekli Tepe is not the only ancient site that suggests organised human activity further back than our standard timeline assumes. Around the world, researchers have found other anomalies, strange structures that seem too old, carvings that suggest knowledge that should not have been available yet, alignments with stars that would only have been visible thousands of years before the supposed date of construction. None of this is definitive. None of this is proof of a lost civilization in the dramatic golden crystal sense that some storytellers love to imagine. But it is a gentle, persistent set of questions, a soft knock at the door of what we think we know. If humanity was capable of building Göbekli Tepe 12,000 years ago, what else might have been happening in that same era that we simply have not found yet? What was going on along those drowned coastlines? What was happening in the valleys that are now under the sea? Let's rest in that question for a moment. The world was a very different place 12,000 years ago. The ice was melting, the seas were rising, whole landscapes were being transformed within living memory, and humans, curious, organised, spiritually complex humans, were moving through all of it. They were watching the stars. We know this because so many ancient sites are aligned with star positions that match specific dates in deep history. They were telling stories. We know this because those stories have echoed down to us through thousands of years of oral tradition and eventually found their way into written texts. They were building things. We know this because some of those things survived, but so much did not survive. And the question that floats softly in the night air is this: what came before the things that survived? Chapter 4. The Patterns That Repeat. Here is something that I find quietly fascinating. When archaeologists and historians look at the rise of early civilizations, the ones we know about, the ones that left enough traces for us to see, they notice a pattern. Again and again, in different parts of the world at different times, civilizations seem to begin with certain things already in place. They begin with agriculture, with the growing of specific crops, wheat, rice, maize, that were deliberately cultivated over long periods of time. The plants that humans use for farming today are very different from their wild ancestors. They have been selectively bred generation after generation to be more productive, more reliable, easier to harvest. That kind of selective breeding takes a very long time, hundreds or thousands of years of careful, deliberate cultivation. Where did the knowledge of how to do this come from? In the standard story, it emerged independently in several places: the Fertile Crescent, China, Mesoamerica, around 10,000 years ago at roughly the same time. But a few researchers have quietly asked, why did it happen in so many places at roughly the same time, after hundreds of thousands of years of humans not doing it? What changed? One answer is climate. The end of the Ice Age brought warmer, more stable weather. That made agriculture more possible and more rewarding. That is a good answer. Another answer, offered more softly, is that maybe the knowledge of agriculture did not emerge independently in each of those places. Maybe it was transmitted. Maybe there was a network, thin, fragile, but real, of people who already understood the principles of growing food and who carried that knowledge with them as the great floods of the post-Ice Age world scattered communities across the landscape. Not a dramatic secret society, not a magical ancient order, just people, practical and resourceful, carrying seeds and knowledge from one community to the next as the world changed around them. Let's think about that image for a moment. Picture a small group of people walking. The world around them is wet and changing. The sea has come for their old home, the coast where their grandparents lived. They're moving inland, moving uphill, carrying the most important things: their children, their fire, their tools, and their seeds. And somewhere in their minds, somewhere in their memory and in the stories their elders told, is a deep knowledge of how the world works, how to read the sky, how to find water, how to plant a seed and wait, and then plant again, and how the cycle of seasons can be trusted if you know how to work with it. They carry this knowledge the way we carry our most precious things, not written down, because writing has not yet been invented, at least not writing that we can find but spoken, sung, memorized, repeated. And they arrive in a new valley, in a new community, and they share what they know. This is one of the most human things imaginable. Knowledge travelling with people through disaster, surviving because someone chose to remember it and pass it on. Some researchers have noticed that the earliest myths and sacred stories of many cultures seem to contain what look like very old encoded pieces of practical knowledge, star charts embedded in mythology, agricultural cycles wrapped in stories about gods and seasons, navigational information hidden in the movements of divine figures across the sky. This idea that myths can be a kind of memory palace, a way of encoding important information in a form that can survive without writing, is called, in some research circles, the mythological transmission theory. It is not universally accepted, but it is a thoughtful, gentle idea, and it connects to our question in a very interesting way. If a civilization existed before our recorded history, even a modest one, not a grand empire but a wide network of communities with real knowledge, and if that civilization was largely destroyed or scattered by the catastrophic end of the Ice Age, then what would survive? Not the buildings, not the roads, not the pottery. The stories would survive. The things people kept in their minds and in their mouths, that they told their children on cold nights, that they carried across the floodwaters and up into the hills. The stories would survive. And here we are, thousands of years later, still telling them. For a moment, just breathe. The world outside is quiet. The night is doing what it does, turning slowly, holding everything in its dark, gentle arms. You have been travelling with me for a while now, through ice ages and rising seas, through ancient stones and old floods, through seeds and stories and the long, quiet memory of the human species. If you feel sleepy, that is exactly right. That is what tonight is for. Let the images drift and soften. Let the words become a kind of gentle current that carries you. If you fall asleep here, that's okay. More than okay. You can always come back. The story will be here. Chapter 5. The civilization that left. No name. Let's imagine something together, not as a fact, as a thought experiment, as a soft, quiet exercise in wondering. Imagine a civilization, and I use that word loosely, gently, that existed somewhere between 20,000 and 12,000 years ago. During the later part of the last ice age and the tumultuous period of its ending, this is not a civilization of skyscrapers and computers. It is not a civilization of empires and written law. But it is a civilization in the way that matters most. A connected network of communities that share knowledge, that observe the sky, that understand the cycles of nature in deep and sophisticated ways, that pass wisdom from one generation to the next with great care. They live mostly along coastlines and river valleys. They know the sea intimately, how its currents move, how its tides shift, how the stars guide travellers across its surface. They have boats, perhaps not ocean liners, but sturdy, well-built boats capable of long journeys. They have a deep relationship with the land. They know which plants can be cultivated. They know how to manage a forest to encourage useful growth. They understand that certain actions now will produce certain results in 20 years, in 50 years. They are not primitive. They are sophisticated in the ways that matter for survival and community life. And then the world begins to change around them. Slowly at first. The ice retreats. The seas begin to rise. Not in a week, not in a year, but over generations. Their coastlines shift. Their fishing grounds move. Villages that have existed for centuries are gradually swallowed by the ocean. Some communities survive by moving. Some do not. And over the course of perhaps 3,000 years, a very long time in human terms, this civilization is scattered, reduced, transformed. Its coastal settlements are drowned. Its most fertile valleys are flooded. Its networks of communication are broken. What survives? The people who moved inland survive. They carry their seeds and their stories and their sky knowledge with them. They arrive in new places. They teach what they know. Some of their knowledge blends with the knowledge of communities already living in those new places. Some is lost. Some is misunderstood or changed over time. And then, a few thousand years later, something interesting happens. In the places where these survivors settled, organized communities start to emerge. Agriculture appears. Monumental building appears. Astronomical observation appears. Complex social structures appear. And the people who created these new civilizations, ancient Egypt, ancient Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley civilization, the first cities of China, they speak of mysterious teachers, of wise ones who came from elsewhere, of knowledge given by gods or divine beings who arrived from a great distance. Are those gods a memory, a dimly remembered face of the people who came before? I want to be gentle here. I want to be honest. This is not proven. This is a hypothesis, a thoughtful Interesting hypothesis that some serious researchers have entertained, but one that most mainstream archaeology treats very cautiously, and for good reason. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the evidence for a full lost civilization is so far incomplete. But incomplete is not the same as impossible, and the humility to say, we do not know everything about deep human history, is not the same as believing in fantasies. It is just being honest about how much of the book of the past has been erased. The ocean floor is vast and mostly unexplored. The oldest layers of soil in inhabited regions have rarely been excavated below the most recent historical strata. Our tools for reading the deep past are still developing, and every decade it seems something new is found that pushes the story back a little further. Every decade, the beginning moves earlier than we thought. Think of it this way. 30 years ago, the scholarly consensus was that complex, organised human behaviour could not be dated earlier than about 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. The earliest cities, the earliest writing, the earliest evidence of civilization as we understand it. Then Göbekli Tepe was excavated, and the date moved back to 12,000 years. In recent years, sites in Turkey, in Indonesia, in the Americas, in Southeast Asia have suggested even earlier dates for organised construction and symbolic thinking. The story keeps getting older, and each time it does, the gap between what we know and what might have happened becomes a little wider. That gap is not emptiness, it is possibility, quiet, gentle, enormous possibility. The night is getting softer now. We have travelled a long way together in this first part of our journey. From the question of who came before us, through the language of deep time, through the Ice Age and its floods, past the mysterious stones of Göbekli Tepe, into the patterns of knowledge that repeat across cultures, and into the gentle imagining of a civilization that left no name. A civilization perhaps made not of stone and gold, but of knowledge and story, a civilization that maybe, in some small but real way, is still present in us, in the stories we tell, in the way we look up at stars and feel something we cannot quite explain, in the flood myths that echo through every culture on Earth, in the seeds we plant following patterns of cultivation that are older than any written record. Maybe they are not entirely gone. Maybe something of them lives in the way we are, the way we gather, the way we wonder, the way we reach for the sky on clear nights and feel that the universe is trying to tell us something. Maybe we are the reset of their story, and someday, something in our story, some encoded piece of knowledge, some myth we pass on without fully understanding why, will reach forward through time and find someone we will never know. The world turns slowly, and it forgets, and it remembers. And tonight, for just this quiet hour, we are remembering together. Tonight we continue our quiet journey together. Tonight we go deeper. We go further back and further inward. But before that, hit subscribe to Deep Earth Stories. Here we drop new Earth documentaries to help you rest, relax and reconnect with our planet. We have been asking a question together, a slow, wide, patient question. What if we are not the first? What if somewhere in the deep past and dust in the drowned coastlines and the buried valleys and the long silence before our recorded history, there was something, a people, a network of knowledge, a civilization with no name that we know of, no monument that has clearly survived, but whose echoes might still be moving through us in ways we have not fully understood. We're not here to find a definitive answer. The Earth does not give those easily. We are here to wander slowly and gently in the quiet of the night. So let's drift a little further into this story. Chapter 6. The sky was their library. Picture: a night sky with no light pollution at all, no streetlights, no city glow on the horizon, no screens, no lamps, nothing glowing except the stars themselves. Imagine you're standing in an open field 10,000 years ago. The grass is cool and damp under your feet. The air smells of earth and distance. And above you stretches a sky so full of stars that the darkness between them almost disappears. The Milky Way is not a faint smudge. It is a river of light, thick and bright and absolutely overwhelming, arching from one edge of the horizon to the other. And you have been watching this sky your entire life. So has your mother. So did her mother before her. And her mother before that, stretching back through generations of human beings who had no other great library than the sky above them. Early humans, and by early I mean humans going back tens of thousands of years, were extraordinary astronomers. Not astronomers in the way we use the word today, with telescopes and mathematics and space observatories, but astronomers in the deepest, most practical sense. People who watched the sky with extraordinary attention for their whole lives, and who built up detailed knowledge of its patterns. They knew where the sun rose and set at different times of year. They knew the cycles of the moon, the gentle rhythm from new to full and back again, 29.5 days, reliable as breathing. They knew which stars appeared in which season. They knew the difference between a planet and a star, because they watched closely enough to see that planets move while stars hold their patterns, and they encoded all of this knowledge, not in books, not in computers, but in stories, in ceremonies, in the alignments of stones, in the shapes of sacred sites, in the patterns of mythology. The sky was their library, and they read it with a patience and a precision that we, in our bright, distracted world, can barely imagine. Here is something that researchers have found again and again when they study ancient sites. Many of the most significant stone structures, burial mounds and ceremonial places around the world are aligned with specific astronomical events. Stonehenge in England aligns with the sunrise at midsummer and the sunset at midwinter. The Great Pyramid at Giza aligns with extraordinary precision to the 4 cardinal directions and to specific stars. The ancient site of Newgrange in Ireland, which is older than both Stonehenge and the pyramids, is designed so that once a year, on the morning of the winter solstice, a single beam of sunlight enters through a precisely shaped opening above the doorway and travels down a long stone corridor to illuminate the inner chamber. Just for a few minutes, just on that one morning. This is not an accident. This is engineering. This is the result of people who understood the sky so precisely that they could design a stone building to capture a single shaft of light on a single morning of the year. Think about what that requires. You need to know the exact angle of the winter solstice sunrise. You need to know how to translate that angle into the physical dimensions of a stone corridor. You need the tools and the organised labour to build it, and you need the social memory to carry that knowledge across the many decades that a construction project like this must have taken. Newgrange is approximately 5,000 years old. Göbekli Tepe, with its carved circles and deliberate alignments, is more than twice that age. What was being built in the years between them, in the places we have not yet found? There is a field of research called archaeoastronomy. It is the study of how ancient peoples understood and interacted with the sky, and it has quietly produced some very interesting, very humbling findings. One of those findings concerns a slow movement of the Earth called the precession of the equinoxes. Let me explain this gently because it is actually a beautiful thing. The Earth spins like a top, and like a top that is slowing down, it wobbles slightly. This wobble is extremely slow, so slow that a single complete wobble takes approximately 26,000 years. Because of this wobble, the positions of the stars as seen from Earth change very, very slowly over long periods of time. The North Star today is a star called Polaris. But 5,000 years ago, the North Star was a different star, and in another 12,000 years it will be different again. The point in the sky where the sun rises on the spring equinox also changes slowly, over thousands of years, moving through the 12 constellations of the zodiac. This is what astrologers refer to when they talk about ages: the age of Pisces, the age of Aquarius. Each age lasts roughly 2,000 years. Now, here is the interesting part. Some researchers have argued that several ancient mythological and architectural traditions around the world encode knowledge of precession, this 26,000-year wobble, in ways that are mathematically precise. If that is true, it means someone, somewhere, observed the sky carefully enough over a very long period of time, long enough to notice this incredibly slow change, to document it and encode it. To notice the precession of the equinoxes through direct observation alone, without mathematical modelling, would require observations spanning at least several centuries, perhaps more. That kind of long-term, systematic sky observation requires a civilization, not a single person, not a single generation. A culture with institutional memory, a culture that maintains records, that passes knowledge deliberately across many human lifetimes, a culture of some sophistication. And some of the evidence for this encoded knowledge appears in mythological traditions that predate any civilization we have officially recognized. For a moment, just breathe. Notice the gentle weight of your limbs. Notice how the room feels still and soft. The questions we're exploring together are old. They have been floating in the air for a long time. They are not demanding anything of you. If you're drifting, that is beautiful. Let the images come and go like slow clouds. You are safe. The night is quiet. Chapter 7. The Language of Myth. There is an old story told in many cultures, a golden age, a time of great wisdom and harmony, when human beings lived in deep connection with the natural world, when knowledge was abundant and life was good. And then, slowly or sometimes suddenly, that golden age ended. Darkness came, things were lost, and humanity was left in a diminished world, carrying only fragments of the great knowledge that had once existed. This pattern, the golden age, the fall, the diminished present, appears in Greek mythology, in Hindu cosmology, in ancient Persian texts, in Aztec creation stories, in Norse mythology, and in dozens of other traditions. The Greeks called their golden age the reign of Kronos. The Hindus call their cycle of ages the yugas, with a golden Satya Yuga at the beginning, followed by ages of increasing darkness. The Aztecs described previous suns, or worlds that had existed before this one, each destroyed and replaced. All of these traditions share something in common, a memory or a sense that something was lost, that what we have now is not the whole story, that there was once more. Now, the standard interpretation of these myths is symbolic. They represent the human experience of aging, of loss, of the imperfection of the present moment compared to idealized memory. Every generation feels that things were better before. That is a deeply human feeling, and that is probably true in many cases. But some researchers have wondered whether these myths carry a deeper layer, whether, beneath the symbolic meaning, there is a faint, ancient memory of something real. A time when human knowledge and organisation were more widespread than they are in our oldest surviving records. A network of wisdom that was scattered by catastrophe, flood, cold, climate change, and has been slowly, imperfectly rebuilt over the thousands of years since. This is not the only interpretation, but it is a thoughtful one, and it is one that the evidence, small and scattered as it is, does not entirely rule out. Here is another story pattern worth noticing. Across many mythologies, there are figures who appear as bringers of civilization, teachers, wise ones who arrive from elsewhere, often from the sea or from a destroyed land, and who bring with them the gifts of agriculture, astronomy, law, building, writing. In ancient Sumerian tradition, there are beings called the Apkallu, the seven sages, who are said to have come from the sea before the Great Flood and taught humanity everything they needed to know about civilization. In ancient Egyptian tradition, there is a concept called Zep Tepi, the first time, a golden age that preceded all recorded history, when gods or divine beings walked the earth and established the foundations of civilization. In the traditions of the ancient Maya, there are figures called the hero twins, and older figures before them, who represent wisdom and cosmic knowledge that predates the current world. In the stories of the Aboriginal Australians, who have one of the oldest continuous oral traditions in the world, stretching back at least 65,000 years, there is the concept of the dream time, a foundational era in which the shape of the world and the laws of existence were established by ancestral beings. In each case, there is this sense of something primary, something before, a source from which the present world was derived. Are these stories entirely metaphorical? Probably mostly yes. But might they contain, in their deep layers, a compressed and transformed memory of real people, real events, real knowledge that was transmitted across the catastrophic transition from the Ice Age world to the world we eventually built? That is the question that drifts softly through the night. Chapter 8. Stones Underwater. Let's go somewhere specific for a moment. Somewhere that has been quietly gathering scientific attention for the last few decades. Off the coast of the Indian subcontinent in the Gulf of Kambat, a body of water in northwestern India, there is something strange on the ocean floor. In 2001, oceanographers conducting a survey with sonar equipment detected what appeared to be geometric structures, straight lines, regular angles, features that do not look like natural rock formation but look, at least from certain perspectives, like the ruins of buildings. The depth of the water, combined with what is known about sea level rise since the end of the last ice age, suggests that this area of ocean floor was last above water approximately 9,000 to 10,000 years ago. If there are indeed structures there, and this is still debated, still being studied, it would place human construction activity in that region at a time far earlier than the oldest known Indian civilization. Samples taken from the site were dated and produced controversial results. Some organic material was dated to approximately 9,000 years old. Some researchers interpreted this as evidence of an ancient settlement. Others argued the dating was not reliable, or that the structures were natural formations. The honest answer is, we do not know yet. The site is difficult to excavate. Underwater archaeology in murky, sediment-heavy water with powerful currents is extraordinarily challenging. The research is ongoing, but it is not the only underwater site that has attracted attention. Off the coast of Japan, near the small island of Yonaguni, there is a well-known underwater rock formation that has been argued about for decades. The Yonaguni Monument, as it is sometimes called, is a large rock structure at a depth of 5 to 25 metres. It features what appear to be terraced platforms, straight edges, right angles and staircase-like formations. When it was first investigated by divers in the 1980s, some researchers argued that it showed clear signs of human construction, that the precise angles and flat surfaces could not be entirely explained by natural erosion. Others argued that sandstone can fracture along natural fault lines in ways that produce strikingly geometric shapes, and that the Yonaguni formation, while dramatic, is natural. The debate continues. What is not debated is the depth. The shallowest parts of the structure were at a depth consistent with having been above sea level, approximately 10 to 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age. Whether built by human hands or carved by nature, the Yonaguni Formation is a reminder that the ocean floor holds a great deal that we have not yet examined. Let's pause here and breathe together for a moment. We have been moving through some genuinely fascinating territory: Ice Age coastlines, underwater archaeology, ancient mythology and sky knowledge, the patterns that repeat across cultures and continents. None of it is proof. I want to be gentle and clear about that. But all of it is part of a picture that is slowly, quiet, becoming more interesting than the simple story we used to tell. The story that civilization began from nothing 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. That story is almost certainly too simple. The real story is older, more complex, more layered, and much of it is still waiting, underwater or underground, or in the deep patterns of myths we have not yet learned to read. If your eyes are heavy, let them close. Let the images I've been painting become soft and dark, like a room where someone has turned down the light. You do not need to hold all of this. You do not need to remember it. Just let it flow through you, slowly, the way water flows through dark earth. Chapter 9. What the ice remembers. There is another kind of archive that the earth keeps, one that is very different from stone or myth: ice. In Antarctica and Greenland and in the high mountain glaciers of the world, there are layers of ancient ice that go back hundreds of thousands of years. Scientists drill down into this ice. They call the samples ice cores, and they read the layers like a very slow, very cold book. Each year of snowfall leaves a distinct layer in the ice, and each layer carries tiny trapped bubbles of ancient air. Air from thousands of years ago. Air that the world breathed when mammoths walked across Europe and early humans sat around small fires under enormous star-filled skies. By analysing these bubbles, scientists can tell what the atmosphere was like in any given year, how warm the world was, what gases were present, whether there were large volcanic eruptions or wildfires or other major events. The ice cores tell us a story about the end of the last ice age that is both beautiful and sobering. The transition from the ice age world to our current climate was not entirely smooth. There were periods of rapid warming, then sudden cooling, then warming again. There was a particularly sharp cold period around 12,900 years ago called the Younger Dryas, sometimes called the Big Freeze, which lasted for about 1,200 years and saw temperatures plunge dramatically before the warming resumed. The cause of the Younger Dryas is still debated. The most widely accepted hypothesis is that massive amounts of fresh water from melting glaciers flooded into the North Atlantic, disrupting the ocean current patterns that carry warm water northward and temporarily cooling the northern hemisphere. But there is a more recent hypothesis, still controversial, still being researched, that a comet or asteroid impact may have contributed to the sudden onset of the Younger Dryas. This is the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. It suggests that around 12,900 years ago, fragments of a large comet struck or exploded over the North American ice sheet, causing massive wildfires, a sudden disruption of climate, and the extinction of many large animal species: the woolly mammoth, the mastodon, the giant ground sloth. The impact hypothesis is not universally accepted. It has been argued about intensely in the scientific community. Some researchers find the evidence compelling, others find it insufficient. But something did happen around that time. That much is agreed upon. The climate shifted sharply. Many large animals went extinct, and human populations across the affected regions experienced significant disruption. If there were communities, organised knowledge-bearing communities, living in the northern parts of the world during this period, they would have experienced something genuinely catastrophic. Sudden cold, darkened skies filled with smoke and dust, fires on the horizon, animals dying, food sources disappearing, and the survivors would have fled south, would have descended into warmer lands, carrying their knowledge and their fear with them. Is it possible that this event, or this combination of events, the impact, the younger Dryas, the ongoing sea level rise, is the real source of the global flood and catastrophe myths? Not just the flooding of coastlines, but fire from the sky, sudden cold, the death of the great animals. The book of Genesis speaks of waters above and below. Ancient Sumerian texts speak of fire and flood together. Many traditions describe the end of the previous world as a combination of catastrophes, not a single event. This might not be coincidence. This might be memory. Very old, very compressed, barely recognizable memory, wrapped in the language of myth and symbol, because that was the only language available to carry it forward across 10,000 years. Chapter 10. The Survivors. Let's return to our imagined people, the ones who lived before the Great Transition, the ones who felt the ice melt and the seas rise and the sky darken. Let's think about who they might have been, not as fantasy, but as a gentle exercise in historical empathy. They were us. That is the thing that is easy to forget. They were anatomically modern human beings, with the same size brains we have, the same capacity for language and memory and love and fear and wonder. They were not more primitive in any fundamental way. They were simply living in a different era, with different tools and different challenges, and they had been living and learning for a very long time. Our species, Homo sapiens, has existed in roughly its current form for at least 300,000 years. 300,000 years. For most of that time we were living in ways that left very few archaeological traces, hunting, gathering, moving with the seasons, building shelters of wood and animal skin that have long since dissolved. But we were not standing still mentally. We were talking, thinking, learning, observing, storing knowledge in the one storage system we always had, each other. By the time of the last Ice Age's end, 12 to 15,000 years ago, our ancestors had been accumulating experience and knowledge for hundreds of thousands of years. Observations of the sky, the seasons, the behavior of plants and animals, knowledge about healing plants, knowledge about ocean navigation, knowledge about how communities work, how conflicts can be resolved, how food can be preserved. This accumulated knowledge did not necessarily leave physical traces, but it was there, and when the catastrophe came, whatever combination of flood and cold and fire it was, the people who carried that knowledge did what people always do. They survived the best they could, they moved, they adapted, they held on to what was most essential, and they carried forward in their hearts and their stories the memory of a world that had been. There is a beautiful word in Welsh, hiraeth. It does not translate perfectly into English. It means something like a deep longing for a home that may no longer exist, a nostalgia for something that was lost, or that perhaps never fully was, a homesickness for a place you cannot return to. When I think about the idea of a lost civilization, a world that rose before our histories and fell before our memories, the feeling it produces is something like hiraeth. Not grief exactly, not fear, but a soft, melancholy wonder. A sense that somewhere in the deep past, people like us looked at the same sky, wondered at the same stars, felt the same smallness against the enormous universe, and found ways to build something worth remembering, and that most of what they built is gone, and that the echoes of it still move through us in ways we cannot quite name. That feeling, that soft, ancient ache, is one of the most human things I know. For a moment, just breathe. Let the feeling settle. There is no need to hold it tightly. Let it sit with you the way a memory sits with you, present but not demanding, soft. You have come a long way in this story. You have travelled through drowned coastlines and ancient ice, through flood myths and sky libraries, through stones that ask quiet questions and waters that hold ancient answers. There is still more to come, still more to drift through together. But for now, let this be enough. Let the word Hyrith float through your mind, a longing for a world that once was, a world that left almost nothing behind, only this feeling, only this persistent, gentle sense that we are not the whole story, that we are perhaps a continuation, a reset, yes, but not a beginning from nothing, a reset that carried something forward, something ancient and essential and quietly alive in every human being who's ever looked at the stars and felt that wordless pull toward the infinite. That is what we carried out of the deep past. That is what the survivors brought with them when they walked inland from the rising waters. Wonder, the capacity for wonder, and that perhaps more than any stone monument or mythological text is the most enduring thing our unknown ancestors left us. The night is deep now. If you are still with me, breathing quietly in the dark, that is wonderful. If you have drifted, that is wonderful too. The story holds you gently either way. We have been somewhere real tonight. We have sat with some of the deepest questions humans have ever asked, and we've done it slowly, carefully, without fear. The world turns, the stars move in their slow circles. The ice cores in Greenland hold their cold memories. The ocean floor keeps its secrets. And somewhere in all of that silence, the echo of who we were and who we might have been before drifts on. Let your breathing slow a little more. Let the images soften. We will go further in the next part of this journey, but for now, rest. The world is quiet, and so are you. We are still here together. The night is still soft. The world outside is still quiet. And this story, this long, slow, gentle journey through deep time, is still moving forward, one breath at a time. Tonight we go deeper still. We have already wandered through ice ages and rising seas. We have stood at the edge of drowned coastlines and wondered what lies beneath. We have listened to flood myths echoing through every culture on Earth. We have visited the ancient stones of Göbekli Tepe and felt the quiet question they carry. Now we go further inward, further into the mystery, and further into the soft philosophical heart of what all of this means for us. For the people lying here in the dark, breathing slowly, wondering about the world. Let's begin. Chapter 11. The Map That Should Not Exist. In the year 1513, a Turkish admiral named Piri Reis drew a map. It was not an ordinary map. It was extraordinarily detailed for its time. It showed the coastlines of Europe, Africa, and, most remarkably, South America, at a time when South America had only been known to European explorers for about 20 years. The level of accuracy for the South American coastline was unusual for the period. But the most extraordinary feature of the Piri Reis map, the one that has fascinated and puzzled researchers for decades, is this. It appears to show Antarctica. Antarctica was not officially discovered by European explorers until 1820, 300 years after Piri Reis drew his map. And not just Antarctica as a vague southern continent. Some researchers have argued that the coastline depicted at the bottom of the map corresponds to the actual coastline of Antarctica as it exists beneath its ice sheet, the rock coast, not the ice coast we see today. The ice sheet covering Antarctica has existed for millions of years. To know the shape of the coast beneath that ice would require either extremely sophisticated sonar technology or knowledge from a time before the ice was as thick as it is now. Piri Reis himself wrote notes on the map saying that he compiled it from older sources, from ancient maps that he had access to in Constantinople. He claimed to be drawing not from his own exploration, but from a library of maps that came before him, from a library of knowledge that is now lost. Now, the honest and careful researcher must say, the Piri Reis map is disputed. Many mainstream cartographers argue that the apparent depiction of Antarctica is a misidentification, that the southern continent shown is actually a distorted version of South America's southern tip, or a stylized representation of a theoretical landmass that mapmakers of the era routinely included. That is a reasonable position. But here is what makes the Piri Reis map worth sitting with, even if we accept the skeptical view. It is one of a small number of ancient maps that seem to contain information that is more accurate than it should be, given what we know about the exploration history of those times. Some ancient maps show river systems in Africa with remarkable accuracy. Some show mountain ranges that European cartographers did not survey until centuries later. Some show the correct relative sizes and shapes of landmasses that medieval European maps got dramatically wrong. Where did some of this information come from? One soft, quiet possibility, not the only possibility but one, is that some of these maps were copied from even older maps, maps that were themselves copied from older maps, and that somewhere in the chain of copying the original source was much older and much more comprehensive than anything we have officially documented. A cartographic tradition from a civilization that travelled widely, that mapped what it found, and whose original records were eventually lost, but whose copies of copies of copies survived into the historical period, getting gradually distorted but retaining fragments of accurate information. This is speculation, gentle, careful speculation. But it is the kind of speculation that the evidence allows, and it fits the broader pattern we've been following, the pattern of fragments, echoes, half-remembered things that suggest something larger once existed. For a moment, just breathe. Let the idea of an ancient map drift through your mind like a slow ship on a dark sea. You do not need to hold it firmly. Let it float. Let it go where it wants to go. If you feel your body getting heavier, that is right. That is the night doing its work. The questions are not going anywhere. The mystery will still be here tomorrow. Chapter 12. The Number in the Stone. Here is something mathematical, but I promise to make it gentle and slow. All around the world, ancient peoples built structures with very specific dimensions, and when you measure those dimensions carefully, really carefully, you sometimes find numbers that are surprising. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, has been measured thousands of times by engineers and mathematicians, and certain relationships in its dimensions come very close to mathematical constants that we consider fundamental. Things like the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, the number we call pi. Whether this was intentional, whether the builders of the Great Pyramid deliberately encoded pi in the pyramid's proportions, is debated. It may have emerged naturally from the way they measured and constructed. It may have been intentional. We cannot be fully certain. But here is what is not debated. The Great Pyramid was built with extraordinary mathematical precision. The base is almost perfectly level. The four sides align almost perfectly with the cardinal directions. The angles are consistent to a degree that is remarkable even by modern engineering standards. This precision required mathematics. Real, sophisticated, applied mathematics. And the pyramid was built roughly 4,500 years ago. What mathematics did the builders use? How did they achieve this precision? The full answer is still not settled among scholars. And here is the softer layer of this question. If the Egyptians of 4,500 years ago had this level of mathematical and engineering ability, where did it come from? They did not spring into existence knowing how to build the most precisely aligned large structure in the ancient world. They must have had a tradition of mathematical and astronomical knowledge that preceded the pyramid, a tradition built up over many generations. How far back does that tradition go? There is a concept in the history of science called precocious knowledge. It refers to instances where ancient cultures seem to know things that they logically should not have known yet, that appear, by the standard timeline, to have arrived before the supposed development of the tools needed to discover them. Examples appear in multiple ancient traditions. Ancient Greek thinkers like Aristarchus proposed that the Earth orbited the Sun, roughly 1800 years before Copernicus. Ancient Indian mathematicians had sophisticated knowledge of trigonometry and numerical systems that rivaled anything in the contemporary Western world. The ancient Babylonians tracked astronomical cycles with precision that still impresses modern astronomers. Each of these can be explained individually. Brilliant individuals, brilliant cultures, making discoveries ahead of their time. But together, they paint a picture of human intellectual capacity that has been remarkably consistent for a very long time. The specific tools and technologies have changed dramatically, but the fundamental ability to observe, to reason, to calculate, that seems to have been present in human beings for far longer than we sometimes assume. And that again opens the door to our quiet question. If the intellectual capacity was always there, if the ability to observe the sky, to notice patterns, to do mathematics, to build complex things, if all of that was always present in human beings, going back hundreds of thousands of years, then why would it only have been applied in the last 5,000 or 6,000 years? Why would our ancestors have had this capacity for all that time and done nothing complex with it until just recently? The gentle answer might be, they did not wait. They applied it. They built things. They learned things. They created traditions of knowledge. We just have not found most of the evidence yet, because most of it is underwater, or dissolved, or buried under cities that were built on top of it. Chapter 13. The Memory Keepers. In every traditional culture in the world, in every indigenous community, in every ancient civilization we know of, there is a special role for the person who keeps the memory. The griot in West Africa, the bard in Celtic tradition, the Rawi in Arabic culture, the keeper of sacred stories in Aboriginal Australian tradition, the shaman who memorizes the healing plants and the ceremonial songs, the elder who holds the genealogies and the histories of the tribe. These people were not merely entertainers, they were libraries, living, breathing libraries. Before writing, all knowledge was stored in human memory, and human memory, properly trained and supported, is far more capable than most of us in the modern world realize. Studies of oral tradition have repeatedly shown that stories and songs transmitted verbally, when embedded in ritual and practiced regularly, can preserve information with remarkable accuracy across hundreds of generations. Some Aboriginal Australian stories have been studied and found to contain accurate descriptions of geological events, volcanic eruptions, sea level changes that occurred more than 10,000 years ago. 10,000 years of accurate oral transmission. That is not myth, that is a library. Think about what this means for our question about a lost civilization. If there were communities with sophisticated knowledge, astronomical, agricultural, navigational, mathematical, and if those communities were disrupted and scattered by the catastrophes of the late Ice Age, their institutional records might be destroyed, their buildings might be drowned, their tools might dissolve, but their memory keepers might survive. And if a memory keeper survived, they would do what memory keepers always do. They would find an audience. They would begin to teach. They would wrap the knowledge they carried in stories, in songs, in ceremonies, in the forms that could survive the longest. And those stories, those ceremonies, those encoded pieces of ancient knowledge, they would travel from community to community, from generation to generation, changing shape as they moved, taking on the colours and characters of the cultures they passed through, but carrying their deep structure, their essential information, forward through the centuries and the millennia, until they became the myths we read today, until they became the flood stories, the golden age stories, the sky teacher stories, the wise beings from the sea stories, until they became the persistent worldwide sense that something was once known that we have not quite remembered yet. For a moment, just breathe. Notice where you are. Notice the quiet of the room. Notice the softness of the dark behind your eyelids, if your eyes are closed. You are a memory keeper too in your own way. You carry stories. You carry knowledge that was given to you by people who came before you, going back further than you can trace. Every word you know was given to you by someone else. Every idea you hold has roots in a chain of human mind stretching back into the deep past. You are part of this lineage. We all are. Chapter 14, What the Ocean Keeps. Let's go somewhere very still for a moment. Imagine you're underwater. Not deep, deep ocean. Just gently beneath the surface of a warm sea. The light comes down in slow shifting columns softened by the water. You can see the sandy floor below you. Small fish move in their unhurried patterns. The water is cool and quiet, and there below you, half buried in sediment, are stones. Large stones, too regular to be entirely natural, laid in lines that follow a pattern you almost recognise. This is not science fiction. Underwater structures have been found and documented in many places around the world. Off the coast of Cuba, sonar surveys have detected what researchers have described as a possible submerged city, though extensive investigation has not yet been possible. Off the Yucatan Peninsula, off the coast of India, near the Azores in the mid-Atlantic. In most cases, the evidence is ambiguous. Nature can create surprisingly regular-looking formations. The human eye, even an expert eye, can see patterns where none were intended. But in some cases, the regularity is harder to explain away. The most famous example remains Bimini Road, off the coast of the Bahamian island of North Bimini. Discovered by divers in 1968, it is a formation of large, flat limestone blocks arranged in a curved line stretching for several hundred meters across the ocean floor. Geologists have largely concluded that Bimini Road is a natural beach rock formation, that the regular-looking blocks are the result of natural fracture patterns in the stone, not human construction. But the debate has never entirely closed. Some researchers point to features of the stones, their arrangement, their apparent fitting, the presence of what look like tool marks, and argue that a purely natural explanation is insufficient. The water depth is consistent with the area having been above sea level approximately 10,000 years ago. We may never know for certain. The tools and the funding for deep, careful underwater archaeology of ancient submerged sites are still limited. The political and logistical challenges are enormous. The ocean keeps its secrets patiently, and perhaps that patience is part of the lesson. We're a very young civilization in one sense. We have only had the scientific tools to even begin looking at the deep ocean floor for a few decades. We have barely started. The vast majority of the ocean floor has never been directly examined by human eyes or instruments, and the ocean covers more than 70% of the Earth's surface, 70%, of which the drowned ancient coastlines, the most likely places for ancient human settlement, because humans always lived near water, are a significant portion. The library is largely unread. Whatever answers lie in the deep water are patient answers. They have been waiting 10,000 years. They will wait a little longer. And as our tools improve, as underwater archaeology develops, as sonar resolution increases, As deep-sea exploration technology advances, we will begin, slowly, to turn those pages. What we find may not match the dramatic visions of lost civilizations that have captured popular imagination. It may be humbler than that, and yet more profound. The ruins of ordinary villages, the outlines of ancient harbours, the bones of communities that moved inland from the rising sea and left almost nothing behind. But ordinary is beautiful. Ordinary means real people, living real lives, in places we have not yet been able to see. Chapter 15. The Reset and What It Means. We have been building towards something. Throughout this journey, we have been circling a central idea, gently, slowly, the way water circles a stone. The idea that we are a reset, not a beginning from nothing, but a continuation after an interruption, a rebuilding after a loss, a remembering after a forgetting. And I want to sit with the emotional meaning of this idea for a moment, not just the intellectual meaning, the felt meaning. Because there is something quietly reassuring about this idea if you hold it gently. If we are a reset, if our civilization is in some sense a reconstruction, a rebuilding of something that came before, then we are not alone in time. We're not the only experiment. We're not the only attempt. The fact that something came before us means that the impulse towards civilization, toward gathering, building, learning, sharing knowledge, looking up at the stars and asking why, that impulse is not fragile. It is resilient. It has survived catastrophe before. It has been knocked down and has rebuilt itself. And that, in the long quiet of the night, is a comforting thought. Not because catastrophe is good, not because loss does not matter, but because the rebuilding matters, because the human impulse to understand, to create, to connect, it is tougher than we sometimes feel. We have done this before. Maybe we didn't remember doing it. Maybe the evidence was swept away by flood and time and pressure. But something in us remembered. Something in us kept reaching for the sky, kept planting seeds, kept building things, kept gathering around fires and asking the old questions. That is who we are. That is who we have always been. There is a Japanese concept called kintsugi. It is the art of repairing broken pottery with gold. When a piece of pottery breaks, the kintsugi method does not try to hide the cracks. Instead, it fills them with a mixture of lacquer and gold powder, making the repaired lines gleam. The result is a piece that is more beautiful for having been broken. The breaks are not something to hide. They are part of the story. I think about this in the context of our question tonight. If we are a reset, if our civilization carries the cracks of an earlier breaking, then perhaps those cracks are not shameful. Perhaps they are our gold lines, the places where the old knowledge seeped through, the flood myths, the sky alignments, the mathematical knowledge, the persistent sense of a golden age. These are the gold in the cracks. They are the things that survived the breaking. They are the lines that connect us to whatever came before. We do not need to fully understand them to be grateful for them. For a moment, just breathe. Let the image of kintsugi rest with you. The broken and beautifully repaired bowl, the gold in the cracks, the beauty that comes from being put back together. You do not need to hold the whole story tonight. You do not need to remember all the details. Just carry that one image if you like. The bowl, the gold lines, the quiet beauty of surviving something and becoming more beautiful for it. The room is soft and dark and safe. Your breathing is slow and easy. Chapter 16. The Time Before Clocks. Here is a thought that I find deeply calming. For almost all of human history, time was measured differently than it is today. Not by clocks, not by minutes and seconds, not by the relentless forward march of a digital display. Time was measured by seasons, by the turning of stars, by the rhythm of the moon from new to full and back again, by the coming and going of animals, by the slow cycle of planting and harvest, by the length of a fire's burning, by the depth of a person's sleep. Time was a circle, not a line. There was no falling behind. There was no running out of time. There was only the slow, patient rhythm of the world doing what the world does, turning, breathing, cycling through its vast and ancient patterns. The people of our deep past lived inside that circle, and in a small but real way, when we lie down at night and let the world go quiet and allow ourselves to drift into sleep, we return to that older experience of time. The clocks become irrelevant, the schedule disappears, the body follows its own ancient rhythm, the one that was working long before wristwatches and alarm clocks and calendars. Sleep is a portal, not a dramatic one, not a mystical one, but a real and gentle one. Every night we step through it into something older than civilization, into the body's own deep memory of what time really is, a circle, a turning, a return. Our ancestors, those thousands of years ago, probably had a more comfortable relationship with this truth than most of us do today. They did not fight sleep, they moved with it. When the dark came, the day ended. When the light came, the day began. There was no guilt about rest, no sense that sleeping was wasting time. Rest was not separate from life. It was part of life, an essential, honoured part. And I wonder sometimes whether some of what we are missing, some of the ancient wisdom that our hypothetical lost civilization might have carried, was precisely this comfort with stillness, this trust in the cycle, this willingness to let go of the day and surrender to the dark, not because the dark was nothing, but because the dark was necessary. Because what happens in the quiet, the restoration, the dreaming, the deep biological repair, is not less important than what happens in the light. It is equally important, maybe more. There is research that suggests that the quality of a society's sleep, the collective quality, the average depth and length of rest that its people get, is one of the best indicators of that society's health and stability. Well-rested people are more creative, more patient, more emotionally resilient, more capable of complex thinking and careful decision-making. Sleep-deprived people are more anxious, more reactive, more prone to poor judgment and conflict. A civilization full of well-rested people is a different kind of civilization than one full of exhausted, overstimulated people who have lost touch with the natural rhythm of dark and light. Perhaps one of the things our ancient ancestors understood, encoded in their relationship with the night sky, in their ceremonies timed to the moon, in their lives shaped by seasonal darkness, was the absolute necessity of rest. Perhaps that knowledge too is one of the things that was lost when the old world broke apart, and perhaps that is one of the things we're slowly, imperfectly trying to reclaim. Right now, tonight, in this quiet hour. The story we have been telling together has taken us a very long way. From the question of who came before us, through ice ages and drowned cities, through the sky knowledge of ancient peoples and the patterns in their myths, through the maps that should not exist and the numbers in the stones, through the resilience of the human impulse to rebuild and remember. And now here, in this gentle chapter, we arrive at something closer to home, the question of rest, of what it means to be a conscious being in a very old world, of what it means to know in your bones that you're not the first, that others have been here and wondered and built and lost and rebuilt, that the turning of the world does not depend on your staying awake to watch it. The stars will wheel overhead whether you are watching or not. The ocean will keep its secrets whether you're worried about them or not. The deep past will continue its slow conversation with the present, whether you're listening or not. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to let the questions float. You're allowed to close your eyes and trust that the world will still be here, patient and enormous and full of quiet wonder when you open them again. The night is very deep now. You've travelled a long way in this story, through science and myth, through ocean floors and ancient ice, through the meaning of memory and the geometry of time, and you have arrived here, in this still, soft place, where the only thing that matters is your breathing, in and out. The world is safe, the night is held. Whatever questions we're carrying, they can rest now. They're not going anywhere. Let the story flow around you like warm water. Let the ideas become softer, less distinct, more like the shape of a dream than the content of a lesson. You do not need to understand everything. You do not need to remember anything. Just breathe. Just rest. The night is at its deepest point now. That hour when the world outside has gone completely still. When even the sounds that were there before, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional voice, the small movements of the house settling, have faded into something quieter than quiet. This is the hour that belongs to you, not to your responsibilities, not to your plans for tomorrow, not to the things you forgot to do or the things you're worried about. This hour belongs entirely to you and to the slow, gentle act of resting. We've been travelling together through a very old question, the question of whether we are the first civilization or whether something came before us that we have mostly forgotten. We have walked through ice ages and rising seas, through ancient stones and drowned coastlines, through the sky libraries of our ancestors and the gold lines of Kintsugi, the beautiful cracks in the broken bowl of history. We have not found a definitive answer. We will not find one tonight. That is all right. Tonight, we're going to slow down a little more. We are going to let the facts and the science become softer and more reflective. We're going to turn the great questions of history inward, toward what they mean for us, here, now, in the quiet of this particular night. Let's breathe together, in through the nose, slowly, out through the mouth, even more slowly, and let's begin. Chapter 17. The Weight of Deep Time. There is a particular feeling that comes when you truly sit with deep time. Not just think about it, but sit with it. Let it open inside you like a very large, very quiet room. 4.5 billion years. The age of the Earth. If you tried to count to 4.5 billion, counting one number per second without stopping, it would take you more than 140 years. More than a full human lifetime. You would be born, live your entire life, and die before you finished counting. That is how old the Earth is. And in that enormous span of time, complex animal life has existed for roughly 550 million years, mammals for about 200 million years, primates for 65 million years, something recognisably human for perhaps 3 million years. And recorded human history, the history we tell ourselves, the history in our books and our schools, covers roughly 5,000 years. 5,000 years out of 4.5 billion. If the entire history of the Earth were compressed into a single calendar year, recorded human history would occupy the last 3 seconds of December 31st. 3 seconds. Everything we know. Every empire and every poem, every war and every discovery, every human life ever written down or remembered. 3 seconds. And in those 3 seconds we have managed to convince ourselves that we understand most of what has happened in the previous year. This is both funny and humbling if you sit with it gently. We are very new here. We are very small. And the universe has been doing extraordinary things for an incomprehensibly long time without us. But here is the part that I find quietly comforting. Despite our smallness, despite the brevity of our existence in cosmic terms, We are the part of the universe that is aware of itself. We are the part of the earth that looks back at the earth and says, "You are beautiful." We are the part of deep time that turns around and asks, "How long have you been going?" The stars do not know they are stars. The ancient ice does not know it holds memory. The drowned coastlines do not know they are waiting to be found. But we know all of these things, or we are trying to. And in that knowing, in that reaching outward and backward and upward with our small, curious minds, there is something that feels important. Not grand, not triumphant, just quietly important. We are the universe noticing itself, and that perhaps is what civilization has always been. Not empires, not monuments, not accumulated wealth or military power, but the collective act of noticing, of paying attention, of turning our awareness toward the world and asking slowly and carefully, "What is this? How does it work? How long has it been here? And what does it mean?" If there was a civilization before us, a network of people with knowledge and curiosity and wonder, then they were doing the same thing. They were the universe noticing itself, in their era, in their particular way. And when that civilization ended, the noticing did not stop. It just started over. A reset, a new attempt. The universe through us, trying again to understand itself. For a moment, just breathe. Let that thought settle as softly as it wants to. You are the universe noticing itself. You're the latest in a very long line of curious beings who have looked at the night sky and wondered. That is not a small thing, even if it is a quiet thing. Chapter 18. The Long Conversation. Imagine that all of human history, all of it, including the parts we have not found yet, is a very long conversation. Not a written conversation, an oral one, the kind that happens around a fire or under a wide sky, or in the quiet before sleep. One generation speaks to the next generation listens, remembers, adds something of its own, and passes it forward. The content of the conversation changes constantly. The specific stories, the specific knowledge, the specific questions, these shift and transform as the conversation moves through different people, different landscapes, different eras. But the conversation itself never stops. Not even at the Great Breaks, not at the end of the Ice Age, not at the floods, not at the falls of empires and the burnings of libraries. Because the conversation does not live in buildings. It does not live in books or monuments or carved stones. It lives in people. And as long as people survive, the conversation continues. This is a thought that I return to often, late at night when the world is quiet. We're in the middle of the longest conversation in human history. A conversation that began hundreds of thousands of years ago around a fire in an African landscape that is now very different from what it was, and it has been going, unbroken, through every catastrophe, every migration, every period of darkness and difficulty, and it has reached us, right now, tonight. You are part of this conversation, not just as a listener, as a carrier, as someone who will pass something forward, some idea, some feeling, some small piece of understanding, to someone else, in ways you may not even be able to predict or plan. The conversation does not require you to be famous. It does not require you to build anything lasting. It only requires you to be alive and to pay attention, and to let the things you notice and feel and understand move through you into the world. You're already doing that. You have always been doing that. Chapter 19. The spiral, not the line. Most of us are taught to think about history as a line, a straight line moving from left to right, from primitive to advanced, from ignorance to knowledge, from simple to complex, from past to future. And there is some truth in this picture. Technology does tend to accumulate. Each generation builds on what the previous generation discovered. In this sense, there is genuine progress. But there is another way to see history that is older than the line model and perhaps more honest. History as a spiral, not a straight line going forward, but a turning, cycling movement, like a helix, that revisits the same themes and questions at different levels, in different forms, in different eras. Every civilization that has ever existed has grappled with the same fundamental questions. How do we feed ourselves? How do we organize our communities? How do we understand the sky? What happens after we die? What do we owe each other? What is the meaning of all this? These questions do not go away. They do not get solved and replaced by new questions. They come back in every generation, in every culture, dressed in different clothing but carrying the same deep need. The spiral returns. And this means that even if there was a lost civilization, even if there was a network of wise, sky-watching, knowledge-carrying people whose world was drowned by the rising seas, they were asking the same questions we ask tonight, the same ones. They looked at the stars and felt the same wordless pull toward the infinite that you have felt on a clear night when the sky opened up above you and you forgot for a moment that you were small. They lay down in the dark and felt the same slow pull towards sleep, the same relief of letting the day go, the same gentle dissolution into rest. They wondered whether they were the first, or whether someone had been here before them. Maybe they too told stories about a golden age, a time before their time, when things were somehow more whole. The spiral turns, and here we are at a different point on the same spiral, asking the same ancient questions, feeling the same ancient feelings. We're not separate from them. We are the next turn. For a moment, just breathe. The spiral is a beautiful image. Let it turn slowly in your mind if it wants to. A helix moving through time, each loop revisiting the same deep questions from a slightly different angle, at a slightly different level. You are on this spiral, exactly where you're supposed to be. Chapter 20. The Patience of Stone. Let's visit a quiet place together. Imagine you're standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon in the American Southwest. It is very early morning. The sky is just beginning to lighten at the edges, moving from black to a deep, soft blue. The canyon is still mostly in darkness below you, a vast, profound darkness that breathes with distance. And as the light grows, the walls of the canyon begin to appear, layer by layer. Each layer is a different colour: dark red, then orange, then pale yellow, then grey, then a deep reddish brown, then lighter again. Dozens of layers stacked one on top of the other, stretching down nearly 2 kilometers to where the Colorado River moves like a thin thread of silver far, far below. Each of those layers is a chapter in the Earth's autobiography. The topmost layers are relatively recent, a few million years old. As you go deeper, the layers get older. The oldest rocks at the very bottom of the canyon are nearly 2 billion years old. 2 billion years. Standing at the rim of the Grand Canyon and looking down is one of the most direct encounters with deep time available to a human being. It is all right there, in front of you, in full colour, and it is completely silent. The canyon does not announce itself. It does not explain itself. It just exists, patient and enormous, holding its record of billions of years of Earth history in its quiet, layered walls. There is something in this image that I want to carry into the rest of our story tonight. The patience of stone. The Earth does not hurry, it does not rush its story. It records everything, slowly, carefully, in the language of minerals and pressure and time, and it waits. It waits as long as it needs to. It waits millions of years, if necessary, for someone to come along and read what it has written. We are those readers, and we're still in the early pages. When I think about the possibility of a lost civilization, people who lived before our recorded history and left traces we have not fully found yet, I try to hold the patience of stone. Their traces are there, somewhere, in the layers of the earth, in the sediment of the ocean floor, in the chemistry of ancient ice. The evidence for what happened in the deep past is written in the rock, the way everything that has ever happened on this planet is written in the rock. We have not learned to read all of it yet, but we are learning. Each decade brings new tools, new techniques, new ways of asking questions of the Earth. LIDAR technology, a kind of laser scanning that can see through jungle canopy, has revealed entire ancient cities hidden under the forests of Cambodia and Guatemala that no one knew existed. Deep-sea submersibles have imaged ocean floor features that would have been invisible to previous generations. Every year, the boundary of what we know extends a little further. Every year, the deep past becomes a little less silent. There is a lovely kind of scientific humility that the best researchers carry. It is not the humility of defeat, not the humility that says, we cannot know anything, so why bother? It is the humility of genuine curiosity, the kind that says, we do not know everything yet, and that is wonderful because it means there is still so much to discover. Every "we don't know yet" is an invitation, a door that is not closed, just not yet opened, a question waiting for the right tool, the right technology, the right person in the right place at the right time. The Earth has been keeping its secrets for a very long time. It can afford to be patient, and so can we. The answers, when they come, will come slowly, in fragments, in the cautious, careful language of science, which moves not in dramatic revelations but in small, incremental shifts of understanding. And each small shift will add a little more colour to the picture of who we are and where we came from. Chapter 21. The Fire That Did Not Go Out. Let's think together about fire. For most of human history, fire was not just warmth, it was everything. It was light in the darkness. It was heat against the cold. It was the tool that made food safer and more digestible. It was the centre of every community gathering. It was the thing that kept the dangerous animals away. It was the place where the stories were told and the knowledge was passed down. A community's fire was almost sacred. In many ancient traditions around the world, there are stories about sacred fires that must never be allowed to go out. The Vestal Virgins of ancient Rome tended the sacred flame of the city. In Zoroastrian tradition, sacred fires have been burning continuously for more than 1,000 years. In many indigenous traditions, a community fire represents the continuity of the community itself. While the fire burns, the people live. The fire going out was not just a practical problem, it was a symbol of something being lost. Now think about knowledge as fire. If the civilization we have been imagining, the one that lived through the end of the Ice Age, the one whose coastal cities drowned under the rising seas, if that civilization had a fire of knowledge, a tradition of understanding the sky and the seasons and the plants and the ocean currents, what would it mean for that fire to nearly go out? Not entirely out, because we are here. The fire was not entirely extinguished, but reduced, dimmed, carried by fewer and fewer people in conditions that made the carrying difficult. A handful of memory keepers walking away from the rising water with their most precious knowledge held in the fragile vessel of human memory. And the fire, that knowledge, that tradition, that deep understanding of the world, carried forward, barely. Through the cold centuries of the Younger Dryas, through the chaos of displaced communities and shifting landscapes, and then, gradually, something interesting. The survivors and their descendants began to settle. The climate stabilized, communities grew, and the fire that had been reduced to a few small embers began, slowly, to be fed again. New wood added, new people learning, New observations added to the old ones, the flame growing larger and steadier, until a few thousand years later something that looks to us like the beginning of civilization appears. But it is not a beginning, it is a rekindling, the fire that came back after almost going out. This image, the rekindled fire, is one that I find deeply moving, because it is not just a metaphor for a hypothetical lost civilization. It is a metaphor for something that happens in every human life. There are times when the fire in us goes low, when the light gets dim, when we are depleted and uncertain and the world feels cold and the flame of our curiosity or our hope or our sense of meaning seems very small. Those times are real. They are part of what it means to be human. And then, slowly, always slowly, never all at once, something shifts. A small warmth returns, a flicker of interest in something, a moment of connection. A night like this one, where the questions that used to feel heavy start to feel, somehow, like companions instead of burdens. The fire does not need to be enormous. It just needs to not go out. And if the story of the deep past tells us anything, it tells us that the fire in the human spirit is remarkably hard to extinguish. It has survived ice ages. It has survived floods and darkness and the loss of entire worlds. It is still here, in you, right now, even in this quiet, restful state, even as your body releases the tension of the day, even as your mind grows soft and the thoughts slow down and the dreams begin to form at the edges, the fire is still there, small and steady and warm. For a moment, just breathe. Feel the warmth in your chest. Feel the gentle rhythm of your heartbeat, that small, faithful fire that has been burning inside you every moment of your life without ever being asked to. You're carrying something ancient. You're the latest keeper of a flame that has been burning for a very long time. You do not need to do anything with it tonight. You do not need to add new wood or fan it into brightness. Just let it be there, warm and quiet, doing what it does. Just breathe. Chapter 22. What we are made of. Let's take a very gentle step back. Not back in human history this time, but back even further. Back into the physical story of the universe itself. The atoms that make up your body, every single atom from the calcium in your bones to the iron in your blood to the carbon that forms the backbone of every molecule in every cell, those atoms were made in stars. Not metaphorically, literally. The hydrogen in your body was formed in the first minutes after the Big Bang, nearly 14 billion years ago. Every other element, the carbon, the oxygen, the nitrogen, the iron, was forged in the nuclear furnaces of stars that lived and died long before our sun was born. When those ancient stars ran out of fuel, they exploded. In those explosions, they scattered their atoms across space. Those atoms drifted through the void for millions of years. Some of them eventually gathered under the pull of gravity into a new star, our sun, and the disk of material that surrounded it and eventually became the planets, including Earth. And billions of years later, those same atoms, those ancient stellar atoms, found themselves arranged into molecules, into cells, into organisms, into nervous systems, into consciousness, into you. Lying here in the dark, breathing slowly, listening to a story about deep time, you are made of stars, not just poetically, physically. The substance of your body is the substance of the universe, arranged by 4.5 billion years of Earth history into the extraordinarily complex pattern that constitutes a living, thinking, feeling human being. When I hold this thought alongside the question of our story, the question of who came before us, the question of whether we are a reset of something older, it becomes even more beautiful. Because the atoms in your body have been part of many stories before this one. The iron in your blood may have once been part of a distant star. It may have once been part of the molten core of a young Earth. It may have once been part of the ocean floor, or a mountain, or an ancient forest, or another living being entirely, and it will be part of other stories after this one. We are temporary arrangements of ancient material. We are the universe putting itself together in a particular pattern for a particular time in order to notice and wonder and ask questions. And then, eventually, that particular arrangement will end. The atoms will be released. They will become part of other patterns, other stories, other arrangements of matter and energy moving through the long future of the universe. This is not a sad thought. If you hold it gently, it is simply a true thought, and there is a kind of peace in true things, even when they are large. We are temporary. But we are made of things that are not temporary. We are arrangements of something ancient and persistent, something that has been moving through the universe since nearly the beginning. We are starlight, organised, for a little while. The night is very quiet now. I can imagine you there, wherever you are, the room dark and still, your body heavy and warm, the day completely behind you. We have covered a lot of ground tonight. We have thought about deep time and the spiral of history, about the fire that did not go out and the patience of stone, about the weight of being made of stars and the lightness of knowing we are part of something much larger than ourselves. The questions we started with: what if there was a civilization before us? What if we are a reset? What if the flood myths carry ancient memory? Those questions are still open. They are still floating gently in the dark, but they feel different now, perhaps, than they did at the beginning. Less like puzzles that need solving, more like companions, questions you can carry with you, softly, without needing to resolve them tonight, or any night. The world is full of beautiful open questions, and we're lucky to be the kind of beings who can ask them. Let your breathing slow a little more if it wants to. Let the images from tonight, the drowned coastlines, the ancient stars, the rekindled fire, the spiral turning slowly through time, let them soften and blur at the edges. Let them become less like facts and more like felt things, less like information and more like the quiet background hum of something very old and very true. You are part of this story. You have always been part of this story, from the first stars that made the atoms in your body to the ancient people who carried their knowledge through the rising floodwaters, to the civilization that rebuilt itself and kept asking, kept building, kept looking up. You are the latest point in a very long line. And right now, your point in that line is here, in this quiet room, in this gentle dark. That is exactly where you're supposed to be. Rest now. The next part of our story, the last part, is softer and slower still. More like a dream than a lesson. More like a lullaby than a lecture. But that is for a little later. For now, let the night hold you. Let the questions float. Let the deep past drift around you like warm water, holding you up, carrying you gently toward the most ancient and most necessary thing of all. Sleep well.